Alright, in this video what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the construction history inside of Softimage XSI, and we're going to be going over the modeling construction stack. Okay, so let's see what it is. To be able to see what it is, let's set up a little example scene here very quickly and easily. Let's go over here to Primitive, Polygon Mesh, and we're going to grab ourselves a cube. Let me close the PPG, don't need it. I'm going to hit F12 over this camera view over here so I can maximize it. Then what I'm going to do is go over here to my shading options and activate shaded mode so I can see this better. And I'm going to hit G on the keyboard to hide the grid. Okay, so here's a simple cube. Next thing I'm going to do is hit the plus key on the number pad of my keyboard a couple of times to go ahead and smooth this thing out. And you can smooth it out as much as you want. In this case, this is pretty good. I'm pretty satisfied with this. Next, I'm going to hit Control and the plus key again to toggle the control cage of this sub-D object on so I could see it right on top of my smooth sub-D over there. Okay, so we're ready to work. So what is this construction stuff that I mentioned earlier? Well, every time we go ahead and extrude polygons, cut polygons up, bevel some edges, and make changes like move some of these points around and things, well, XSI makes note of that. Essentially, XSI is remembering all of those changes that we make to this object. So let me show you an example of what it is I'm talking about. Okay, let's look at this object from behind the scenes. Hit 8 on the keyboard to open up an Explorer view, and this is what you'll get, basically a list of the different objects in the scene. We have the default camera, which is the reason why we can see in here. We have a default light, which is the reason that we could see this object lit. And then we have the cube, which we created, which is this sub-D cube right here. Okay, with the cube selected, I'm going to hit E on the keyboard so I can focus in on the selection. And now we can see all the nodes that belong to that cube, and we can see them here in this hierarchy. We're interested over here in this Polygon Mesh node. So let's click this plus icon here to expand that out. And you're going to see a geometry node. The geometry node is the node that's created by default when you create a brand new object like this cube. Now, let's start doing some changes to this object and watch what happens in the Explorer over here. Let me go to, and don't worry about how I'm doing this, trust me, we're going to get into modeling for a very long time throughout this tutorial, so just watch what I'm going to do. Don't worry about how I'm doing it, trust me, you'll get a good dose of that later on. I'm just going to hit U on the keyboard to select, say, this polygon here. Now, you'll see that different construction modes popped up here. We have secondary shape modeling, animation, shape modeling, as well as modeling. The geometry node is under the modeling stack right here. That's because we're in modeling mode, and by default, this geometry node is going to be dropped right into the modeling stack. Now, if we go up here, you'll see a menu with the same exact things. For example, secondary shape modeling mode, here it is. If we go over here, here's animation construction mode, just like the one here. Here's shape modeling mode, there it is, and modeling construction mode, here it is, modeling. And you could quickly tell them apart by the different colors that they have. Okay, so by default, we're in modeling construction mode, which has this lavender color. And now any changes we make to the components of this sub-D are going to be recorded underneath this modeling construction stack right up here with this geometry node. So let me go ahead and select a polygon here. I'm going to right click, and now from my tagged polygons menu, let me go over here and let me just pick one of these. Let's go with Subdivide polygons. So I'll click on that. And now this PPG opens up, which allows me to change how many times I want to subdivide that selected polygon. I'm going to leave it at one iteration is fine. So it breaks it up one time, which is going to equal 4 little polygons. Now if we look over here under the modeling construction stack, you will see that there is a subdivide polygon operator, op for short, on top of the geometry node. So every time we make a change to this guy, for example, if I go to edge mode and pick a couple of these edges, right click and say I go to bevel components, the bevel operator is dropped on top. So basically the most recent commands are recorded on the top of the list. Older commands that I did a long time ago get pushed toward the bottom. So why is this useful? Well, it's useful because we can go back and say grab this bevel op, and we can select it from this construction stack and hit delete on the keyboard to get rid of it. And essentially what it does, it undoes the bevel that we did earlier. So it's like going back through time. Exercise basically making notes of what happens through time as you work on your project. And you can go back and alter that project based on those notes. So it's kind of like hitting Control Z and going back. With the difference being, if we close XSI and open it back up again, Control Z is not going to work. But if you have these nodes in this construction stack and you close XSI and come back tomorrow and open up your scene, these are still going to be there, so you can still go back and undo. So it's a very useful process, a very useful feature in XSI. Now, what happens when you make a ton of changes to this object and that construction stack starts to increase in size? Because the more operations we do, well, the larger this is going to get. I mean, this list will just keep growing and growing and growing and growing and growing. Now, there will be a point where if you make this list too long, in other words, if you keep recording all these operations, XSI will start to slow down. Obviously, you're using up resources to be able to remember all of this stuff. So what do you do in that case? Well, you do some cleanup. Just like a garbage bin, when it gets full of trash in the office, you got to eventually take out the garbage bin and empty it out and pretty much get it ready for a new day of garbage. So, how do we do that? Well, it's pretty simple. All you have to do is make sure that the object you want to clean up is selected. And then down here under this edit menu, we have two buttons, freeze and freeze M. Freeze M stands for freeze modeling. In other words, freeze everything in the modeling construction stack. So you're probably thinking freeze. Well, we're not talking about ice and snow cones. We're talking about getting rid of everything that's here, but freezing all those changes to the object itself, kind of like setting it into stone, so to speak. So watch what happens when I select this object and then I hit freeze M. Now watch this area right here of the Explorer window very carefully when I click on freeze M. Did you see that? What it did was it deleted and it got rid of all the operators that were in my modeling construction stack. But it froze all the changes on the object. So now the object keeps all those changes, but now we can't go back to them. Fortunately, I can hit Control Z to go back. And there they are again. So, here's the trick. If you select one of these nodes and hit delete on the keyboard, you get rid of the node, but at the same time, you get rid of the changes that the node did to the object itself. But if we select the object and hit freeze M or freeze modeling, we delete the nodes, but we keep the changes. So that's a very important difference to take note of and to know. So it's not rocket science. It really only takes a couple of minutes to really understand and go, oh, okay, so that's how it works. And that is how it works. So why is there a freeze button that just says freeze? Well, this freeze button will freeze everything in this stack. So let me show you how that works. Let me hit undo here so I bring back all of the stuff that's under the modeling construction stack. I'm going to come up here to my construction mode and I'm going to switch to shape modeling mode, which is this blue one. And now you're probably wondering what's going to happen. Well, some of you guys are going to be wondering, I'm not sure. Some people are going to get a little bit smart and go, wait, I think I know what's going to happen. And if you guessed that when I start doing some changes to this, that stuff is going to be recorded under the shape modeling stack, then you're right. See, I just moved a couple of points using the tweak tool, and we'll talk about that later. And XSI recorded those changes to the model. See, here's move component, and here's the next move component for a total of 2. I moved components 2 times. And XSI, of course, recorded that. Because I had switched over to shape modeling mode, which is this blue mode, those changes were recorded under the shape modeling stack. So that's pretty interesting. Now, let me select this object and let me go to freeze M. When I click on freeze M, you'll notice that only the stuff under the modeling construction stack gets frozen, but the stuff under shape modeling is left untouched. That's because freeze M, again, only freezes modeling. So when you need to freeze the whole thing, you have to hit this master freeze button, this this freeze button over here is, think of it as the master freeze button. When I hit that, everything gets frozen. So let me undo a couple of times. Here's all the stuff under shape modeling, and here's all the stuff under the regular modeling construction stack, the lavender one. Now when I hit freeze, we probably want to edit that out of the video. So let me undo that. And let's start again in 3, 2, 1. So let me show you what happens when we hit the freeze button with all these things. Let's select the object first, and now let's hit freeze. And you notice everything got frozen. The modeling stack, the shape modeling stack, and if there was anything under animation or secondary shape modeling, that stuff would have gotten frozen as well. So freeze freezes everything, and freeze M only freezes stuff under the modeling construction stack. Very important to take note of. So that's basically it when it comes to the construction history inside of Softimage XSI. In a nutshell, XSI records and remembers everything that you do, and then it's up to you to start cleaning that out every now and then to keep XSI running tough. But in reality, XSI is a really tough program, and it'll really take a long list of operators, I mean very long, before XSI even starts to slow down even a little bit. So you really have to try to be to have a very unclean workflow in order to slow XSI down. So XSI is a pretty tough champ. It could pretty much take everything you throw at it. So only one more thing I want to talk about is this EMED button down here, which is short for immediate mode. And what immediate mode does, it turns off XSI's ability to record stuff. So let me go over here and switch back to modeling construction mode. I'm going to activate immediate mode, and when it's activated, it turns red. This is to get your attention and say, whoa, hey, construction history is turned off. If you start modeling now, XSI is not going to remember what you do, so be careful. So if I take a polygon up here, for example, right click and go to, say, let's subdivide again. Subdivision PPG pops up, a quick window, and I'll hit OK. Watch what happened. After I finished doing the operation, it didn't get recorded into the modeling construction stack. Uh-oh. If I come over here and start moving some points around, that stuff doesn't get recorded either. As you can see, it's not being recorded anywhere in my Explorer window underneath any of these construction stacks, even though we are in modeling construction mode. That's because I turned off XSI's ability to do that by activating immediate mode. This means XSI is not going to record any of those changes you make to your model while you're working. So it's just another way of working. So if you're advanced and you're sure of what you're doing, and you don't need to record all those things, you can activate immediate mode for whatever reason, or you can turn it off. XSI, well, gives you the keys to the car, and you can do whatever you want with that car. Alright, so that does it for construction history and the construction stacks in XSI.